So first off, budgeting isn't just a fancy word for living a sucky life and not having fun, although I could see how someone might get that confused. But that's not what it is. Budgeting is the art of balancing your money. It's all about decision making. You choose what you want to spend your money on, and you choose what money you do not want to spend. You're the boss when it comes to your money, so you make the decisions. The art of putting money where you want it is budgeting. Spending or saving, you make the choice. Look at you, king of your own finances. Or queen, equal opportunity. But you want to make sure you're budgeting correctly. It's very easy to think you're budgeting wisely, while in reality, not so much.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the greatest saver of all? Is it me with my coupons galore, allowing me to save more and more?
Ugh, no, you fool. Your savings are small. Yet you bought this mirror. That wasn't smart at all. Also, I wanted to tell you this earlier, but I'm not really in the mirror. I'm a hallucination. Probably because you drank that old milk this morning. That was a dumb move, dude. So you should probably see a doctor. I am just looking out for you, bro. Don't drink old milk.
There are lots of different approaches you can take when it comes to budgeting, so let's take a look at a few of them now. The first approach is called the zero-based method. This is where you give every dollar you earn every month a job, meaning each dollar you earn every month is accounted for. You're putting it towards something specifically. You have to assign every dollar to a category. Thus, if you make $2,000 a month, everything you give, save, or spend should add up to $2,000. And you have to keep track of it. Now, the benefit to doing this is that it makes you super aware of what every cent you have is doing. You know everything you're saving. You know everything you're buying. There's no, oh, I thought I had another $20. Nope. If you have $20, then you know what that $20 is doing, whether it's been saved or spent and on what. The disadvantage is that this can be a bit time consuming. You have to take the time to track every dollar you have and everything those dollars do, whether it's saved or spent. The next approach is known as the envelope method. This might seem silly to some people, but it does have its purpose. This is where you use a physical, or nowadays you can even use a digital, envelope to represent each category of spending you have. So you may have an envelope for bills, you may have an envelope for saving, you may have an envelope for investments, you may even break down the bills category into something more specific like food, rent, etc. You budget the amount of money that you're going to spend on each of these categories every month, and you take the money and you put it into these envelopes. And once the envelope is empty, you cannot spend from that category anymore until it is refilled, and you cannot refill it until the start of a new pay period, unless you're going to borrow from another envelope, but that gets a bit slippery. Now, the idea of this is to stay true to whatever your goals are. If your goal is to only spend $500 on food this month, then you're going to theoretically put only $500 in the envelope, and when you're running low on that, you're going to have to cut back on your spending. Unless you borrow from another envelope, which again is discouraged. Now, this is more of a relic from the days when people used more cash, because you could actually physically put cash into these envelopes. Nowadays, things are more digital. So instead of using physical envelopes, you can just use digital apps, or you can use different bank accounts, but the idea is the same. You allocate the money you want to spend for each category at the start of the month, and you do not go beyond that amount. The benefit to this is that it forces you to stick with your goals, theoretically. I mean, you could always grab money from one envelope to another, but assuming you're trying to stick with the premise, you will be forced to respect the budget. The drawback is that it's not flexible. You assign what you want, and that's it. You're not supposed to go beyond what you've assigned. So if you assign $500 for food and you run out, you're not supposed to go above that. That's the idea. Then there's the pay yourself first method. Here you decide how much you're going to save each month, and then you immediately deduct that amount from your monthly expenses before you do anything else. You can spend whatever is left as you see fit, but only after you have taken money out that you want to save. Or you can take out money that you want to use for paying off debt. But that's it. Saving or debt. Or both. The benefit to this is that it ensures that you deduct money from your monthly check immediately. Before you do anything, you make sure you take that money you want to save out and you put it in your little piggy bank or whatever. Because that money is not in play, unless it's being used to pay off debt. But if it's being used to pay off debt, then the idea is you're going to pay off that debt so that when the debt is gone, that money is now going to be saved. So essentially, this is a forced approach to saving, and it's pretty easy to do. The drawback is that it's a bit too simplistic. Yes, it ensures that you pay yourself money for savings, but it's not really looking at anything else. So the problem is you're not paying attention to the rest of your money and what else you're spending on. It's simple, but for some people it might be a bit too simple. Then there's the tracking method. The tracking method is where you write down every single cent you spend, putting it into different categories. Very similar to the zero-based method or even the envelope method. But the difference is that instead of starting with the categories, you're going to start with your spending and see where your money's going and then categorize it like that. So the main difference between this approach and the zero-based approach or the envelope approach is that with the zero-based approach and the envelope approach, you're starting with categories from the very beginning. You are assigning your money once you get it. But with this approach, you're going to use your money however you normally use your money, and you're going to keep track of what you're doing. So you're kind of watching yourself. Kind of like a stalker, like a weirdo stalker. You're stalking yourself like a total lunatic. But to keep it simple, this is kind of like a recognizance mission. You're not assigning your money, you're just tracking it. You're looking to see where the money's going. Where is it being spent? It's like hiring a private detective to follow you. And then when the private detective comes back and says, look at what you've been doing, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. I bought how many phone cases?
Phone cases. You only need one, and it does not have to match your outfit. This message brought to you by the foundation of Stop Buying Stuff You Don't Need.
Regardless, the cool thing is that there's tons of apps available that can help you track your expenses. So just do a quick Google search or whatever your preferred browser is. Look for expense tracking apps and choose one that you like. The benefit to this is that it allows for a greater self-awareness. You might be surprised how much you're spending or what you're even spending your money on. Sometimes people don't even realize what they're buying. Maybe right now, you have a 99-cent subscription to some mobile game that you have no idea you're paying for. This approach can be great for that. It helps you audit your expenses, and it forces you to take survey of what exactly you're buying. Then, once you know everything you're buying, you can start to figure out ways you can cut things out and start to save. The drawback, of course, is that this method can also be very time-consuming. And then finally, we have the 50-30-20 method. This encourages people to allocate their money to 3 simple purposes. You have the necessary expenses. This includes bills and everything else you have to pay for. That will be 50% of your money. You have savings or debt, so obviously that's money you want to save or money you want to use to pay off any debt you have. That's going to be 20% of your monthly income. And then 30% will be you spending your money on whatever else you want. So 50% goes to the necessities, 20% goes to your savings or your debt, 30% you get to do whatever you want with. Now, these percentages can be adapted to suit your needs. If you want to save 30%, and only spend 20%, or if you want to save 40% and only spend 10%, you can do that. It's generally suggested that if your necessities are above 50% of your money, then you take the extra money from your discretionary expenses and not from your savings. Now, the benefit to this is that it allows you to assign every dollar, but it keeps it simple by only having 3 easy-to-follow categories, as opposed to some of the other budgeting methods, where you can have unlimited categories. But the drawback is that these percentages may not be ideal for everyone. If you live in a big city, expenses may be much higher than just 50%. So then you have to adapt it to suit your situation, while still trying to maintain the spirit of the idea, which is to make sure you save each month. Now, these are just a handful of budgeting approaches. There's tons more you can look up, but whatever budgeting approach you take, the premise should generally be the same. Pay your bills and make sure you save.
Remember, everything you save matters. Just like everything you spend matters. Everything you spend is something that you didn't save. Just like everything you save is something that you didn't spend. Now, if you're starting with 0, or you're starting with debt, I understand you can easily feel discouraged, but all you gotta do is start. You'd be surprised how momentum carries you if you stick with something. If you have 0 and you're trying to get to 10,000, let's say, that might seem like quite a challenge, but even the mightiest oak was once a little acorn at some point, right? So every penny counts, and yes, they do eventually add up to dollars. You might say, well, I think I might need help with budgeting. Great. Luckily, we live in the future, where we have magic robots and cool gadgets that do stuff for us. And one of the things they do is budget.
If you want help budgeting, there's tons of magical tools out there. Apps that will whisk your money away into savings accounts, before you even get a chance to spend it on things that you don't need. They can be like your fairy godmothers, little fairies forcing you to save. Tinker budget, making sure the money goes to where it's supposed to go, stopping you from buying unnecessary rims for that 1985 Toyota you got. Tinker budget will say save that money. And by Tinker budget, I mean whatever app you're using. Now, you don't need these tools, but they're there if you want them, and they can make things easier. There's a lot of budgeting apps to choose from. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, some of them are subscription-based. Take a look at what's available and find one that you like best if you want to use one. Now, these apps are always changing. They're always being rebranded. But here's a list of a few that are free, at least as of right now, that you might want to use. You have Empower, which was formerly known as Personal Capital. This is really good for tracking investments and your overall net worth. You have Pocket Guard, which is really good for helping you avoid overspending. You have Fudget, which is a straightforward approach to budgeting without a bunch of complicated features that might confuse you. You have Good Budget, which is really good at using the envelope method. And you have Honeydew, which is great for couples who want to manage their finances together.
When it comes to budgeting, it's important to understand the difference between needs and wants. Now, you might hear that and think, dude, that is elementary. Who doesn't know that? Well, the issue is that sometimes people will call a want a need so that they can justify buying it. So let's truly get down and clarify what the difference is.
Shelter and food, that is non-negotiable. It's a need. That 18th pair of shoes, totally negotiable. It's a want. We often fool ourselves into thinking that our wants are needs. It's a classic tale of people tricking themselves. For example, let's say you need a car for work. Well, need means that you either can't do the job without a car, like you're an Uber driver, or you can't get to work without the car, meaning that you have no one that'll pick you up, there's no buses, there's no trains, a cab will be too expensive. You literally need it. If a car would just make life or work more convenient, that's not a need, it's a want. You're allowed to want stuff. You're allowed to buy stuff you want, but it's important to respect the difference because when it comes to saving, your wants are the things you have to cut out first. So you have to be able to differentiate between the two. Now, let's go one step further and discuss frivolous spending versus sensible spending. Frivolous spending is a type of spending that is characterized by purchasing a bunch of luxury items or designer goods or extravagant experiences. These are driven more by your immediate desire rather than any careful planning or consideration for your future financial goals. The impact of frivolous spending can be significant, leading to financial stress and debt and hindering your progress to achieving any kind of goals you have. On the flip side, we have sensible spending. That involves making intentional and responsible choices about how your money is spent. Here, you focus on achieving your goals. Sensible spending is paying for what is really necessary, like housing, food, healthcare, and saving for the future, and avoiding expenses that you don't need to splurge on. You can buy a want sensibly, just like you can buy a need frivolously. For example, if you want a new pocketbook, or a new briefcase, or a new school bag, or whatever, you can spend $1,000 on a Gucci bag, or $10 on a bag of the same size and strength, only without the brand name. Spending Gucci would not be the sensible option here because you're spending extra money just for status or name value. It doesn't help your life much, so the extra expenses would not be justified.
Now, the whole point of budgeting is to reach goals. So, let's take a look at how budgeting can impact your savings. Let's get fiscal.
Fiscal. Fiscal. Fiscal. Fiscal.
I know you're dancing. It's all right. Now, earlier we talked about buying coffee, so let's revisit that. Let's use coffee to take a look at how you can use budgeting to make a difference. So, let's say you buy coffee every day of the week. Is that a want or is that a need? That's a want. Don't lie to yourself. Oh, but I can't wake up without it. Yes, you can. Do you know how I know that? Because you gotta be awake to buy it. So, no matter what you tell yourself, coffee is never a need. But it might be a want that you're willing to spend on. Now, could you cut it out? Yeah. Would you save money by cutting it out? Yeah. But you don't need to be miserable. If coffee is that important to you, get the coffee. But let's be sensible about it.
So let's say you skip Starbucks and you go straight to Bob's Bodega for your coffee. That in itself is more sensible. Let's say Bob sells a large coffee for $2 and a small coffee for $1.50. If you buy the $2 coffee every day, that will cost you about $60 a month, roughly $730 a year. Buying the small coffee every day will cost you around $45 a month, and that will roughly be a 25% savings because you'll only be spending $547.50 every year. The difference between these two is a little over $180, $182.50 to be exact. If you opt for the small coffee over the large, that's going to save you $180 a year. Now imagine you invest that into something like the S&P 500, which is an index of stocks that is super easy to invest in that will give you, let's say for easy math, about 10% profit every year. Meaning that every year that you keep it invested, you're not only going to save $180, you're also going to make $18 of profit just from investing it. That's like hiring your money to go and make you more money. And in this case, it did.
Now you might say saving $180 in a year, that's not a big deal. Earning $18 in a year, not a big deal. And fair enough. But that's just from making one small change. You didn't even give up the coffee. You just bought a cheaper one. Now, if you make lots of small changes like that, those savings can really start to add up. So, as you can see, my dear budgeteers, you don't always have to live like a hermit in a cave to save. It's about making smart choices, like choosing the small coffee, but still enjoying your caffeine kick. The path to wealth is paved with those kinds of small but wise decisions.
Hey, I'd like to order a coffee. Damn, man, you come in here every day ordering yourself a coffee. I'm worried you might be addicted. But since you're here, you might as well get our new triple shot espresso coffee kaboom drink. Quintuple the caffeine. I recommend a grande myself. It's only $400. Yeah, I'm gonna get the small $1.50 one. Oh, you're gonna be cheap about it. Oh, cheapy McCheap. All right, fair enough.
Now that we've talked about saving and budgeting, let's talk about investment. Investing can be a golden ticket for anyone looking to give their piggy bank a serious power-up. I'm talking about Super Mario Mushroom type power-ups. While stashing your cash under the mattress or in a savings account might feel cozy, it's about as effective at growing wealth as planting dollar bills in your backyard. And I don't care how much you water dollar bills planted in your backyard, it's not going to grow a money tree. It just doesn't happen that way, right? Savings accounts and mattresses can hold your money, but they don't grow it. Investment can grow it. So, let's talk about investment.